So I'm back from vacation, and there is a ton of college football news for us to get into, but today we need to talk about the Oklahoma Sooners because Oklahoma picked up some commitments while I was gone, but today we're not going to be focusing on the past. We're going to be focusing on Oklahoma's future because here recently Jackson Arnold stated he thought that the Sooners were in for a huge July in terms of recruitment, and today I'm going to talk about 3 reasons why I agree. Before we do, as always, you all know the drill. I need to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, why for yes, N for no. Do you believe that the month of July will be big for Oklahoma recruiting? And let me know what you're thinking. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification as I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it, and if you enjoyed the content, like and comment down below. And let's see if we can get 50 subscribers off of this video alone by Tuesday, and if we do, I'll be doing a joint video with someone I know Oklahoma fans will love, and you don't want to miss it. But having said all that, let's jump right into it, because Oklahoma's in an interesting position right now. They have got a lot going for them, and they're in a lot of big battles. But here recently at the Elite 11, we heard Jackson Arnold state that he thought that Oklahoma was in for a huge month of July in terms of football recruiting, and if you really look at the landscape of college football recruiting right now, I tend to agree, and I have 3 main reasons as to why, and let's get one thing straight. It's certainly not limited to these 3 reasons. It's just that when I'm thinking of Oklahoma and thinking about the success they could have in the month of July, there are 3 main reasons that I would attribute to it. First and foremost, we need to talk about relationships because that seems to be the name of the game with this current staff. Look, it doesn't matter whether you're talking to high school players, other college coaches, or high school coaches. Relationships seems to be a theme whenever people are talking about the Oklahoma staff in terms of recruiting. And that's a great thing because that's what recruiting is. Establishing positive relationships and maintaining those relationships. And Brent Venables and company have been known for doing this not only at Oklahoma, but when you look at what a lot of these staff members did while they were at Clemson, they were phenomenal at doing it there as well, which gives me complete faith that that's only going to carry over, and we've already seen it carry over. We've already heard about it carrying over, and that's only going to increase. Remember, this staff hasn't been there a year. And sure, this staff is not a bunch of new guys. They have some new faces, such as a Jeff Lebby, who, even though it's not his first time being an offensive coordinator, still a young coach, though very, very talented. And then you have a Miguel Chavez, who this is his first on-field role, but do not let that fool you. He ended up his last year recruiting for Oklahoma as strong as anybody on that staff, and because of that, I made a video talking about just him and how he's a name that I think Sooner fans need to remember because I think he's going to be a big deal here sooner rather than later, no pun intended. So relationships are huge, and when you look at this coaching staff, they're so predicated off of relationships. And let's get one thing perfectly clear. We'll always talk about why this kid committed to a certain institution, and sure, the institution plays a role, but the coaches present at the institution are going to play, in my opinion, a bigger role, because those are the guys that are actually in charge of not only your development as a football player, but your development as a man. And because of that, I think the coaches and the importance of the coaches at the institution cannot be understated. Think about it like this. You could have the best brand in college football, but if you don't have a good head coach there who doesn't establish positive relationships, they're going to have a harder time getting the recruits they should be able to get, as opposed to a middle-of-the-ground team, which I'm not claiming Oklahoma is by any stretch of the imagination. Oklahoma is a proud blue blood, just simply giving an example. That middle-of-the-ground team, if they have an excellent coach and an excellent recruiter, they're going to yield more positive results. So, though the institution matters, the coaches present at the institution matter just as much, if not more, because they're going to be the ones actually doing the development, both in terms of football and in terms of life development, and that importance cannot be understated. My second reason I think Oklahoma is primed for success is actually piggybacking off of the first. So if the first was 1, you could call this one 1A, but I do feel like it is a bit separate. We talked about the relationships that this coaching staff has been able to establish, but what about the coaching staff in and of themselves? And when we talk about that, there's a lot of positive. Look, we can start with Lebby, and even though Lebby is a younger guy in the college football world, he's put up big-time offenses. Just look at what he did not only at UCF with Dylan Gabriel, another reason why I think the Sooners are going to be a team to watch this upcoming season because of the familiarity in that relationship, But then look what he did with Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. And think about it like this. He was already a great offensive coordinator, someone other teams wanted, and then he goes to Ole Miss to learn under Lane Kiffin, universally regarded as one of the best offensive minds in not only college football, but football in general. That can only yield positive results. So I love the Lebby hire. Then you talk about Todd Bates. You go back and look at the defensive lines he orchestrated with the Clemson Tigers, and you're going to be impressed. He can recruit with the best of them. He can develop with the best of them. And not only did they get Bates, but they kept Brent Venables, Bates, Miguel Chavez, and Roof together, and I think that's a great package. And that's not even to talk about Brent Venables, who is the architect of some of the top defenses for Clemson's runs. He had consistent, ferocious defenses with the Tigers, and that's a big reason why Clemson found the success they did. So Brent Venables being the head guy there, establishing these relationships, but also being the quality of coach he is, only gives further credence to the relationships he's trying to get across. Because he can say, hey, not only am I sitting here telling you all these things, go back and check my resume. I'm someone who has fielded great defenses. I'm someone who has developed these guys. So not only am I going to establish great relationships, I can be a top-tier head coach as well. Even though we haven't seen Brent Venables coach a game yet as a head coach, the early results and the early yields are overwhelmingly positive, and I certainly think he's going to be set up for success, and I don't think he's going to be a head coach that fails. I think he's going to have a very positive experience with the Oklahoma Sooners, and I'm very excited to see it. But then if we go over, we can talk about Bill B. And I heard some Oklahoma fans complaining about Bill Bedenbaugh, his recruiting and his development, and I had to stop you at the development. Because if you want to talk about recruitment and some misses, sure, every institution is going to have some misses. But Bill B develops with the best of them. And we could point to last year. Sure, Oklahoma had a shaky start to that offensive line, but they had to replace Creed Humphreys. That's not just something where you can plug and play and instantly replicate what Humphreys gave you, especially from the center position. Now we fast forward a year, Bill B's still there, absolutely one of the best offensive line coaches in the nation. I don't question that for a second, but now he's got new strength and conditioning coach there, someone who's coming back to the Oklahoma Sooners and Schmitty, and I think that's going to be a very powerful tool for Bill B. It will reverberate throughout the entire team, no doubt at all. But if you're talking about where you could see those results most instantly, that offensive line and those trenches, I think, is where you're going to see the real big results, and I think that's going to be great for Bill Bedenbaugh. So my second point has to do with the coaches in and of themselves, because not only are they great at establishing these relationships, but then when you really go down the line and look at who's developing who, they have that as well. Bill B is a great offensive line coach who develops at such a high level. You have Jeff Lebby, who's putting up massive numbers in offense. You have Coach V as the head coach, who just architected great defenses with the Clemson Tigers and developed multiple different positions and really has some unique looks in order to maximize someone's ability, which if you're a recruit, he's going to put you in the best place to succeed. Even if it's not in a traditional role, he's going to do some creative things, and I think that's awesome. Then you look at a guy like Todd Bates, the development is there, the coaching is there, and the relationships is there, which is why I stated you could almost consider this a 1A, but I do believe that there are enough separating factors for it to be a completely separate point. So my 2 points so far are relationships and coaching. And finally, whenever we talk about another area where I think Oklahoma is really set to benefit, it's the move to the SEC. Because the move to the SEC is one that's going to excite recruits across the nation. Texas and Oklahoma are going to see an increase in their recruiting because of it. Because let's be honest, no matter whether you like the SEC or whether you dislike the SEC, we hear time and time again that these top-tier recruits want to go play college football in the SEC. So no matter how you feel about that league, gaining entrance into it with the brand that Oklahoma is overwhelmingly positive for the future of the Oklahoma Sooners. It's going to be interesting to see how they make that transition, as it is going to be interesting for any team making a transition into a new league, especially a league such as the Big Ten and the SEC, where there are already so many established teams. But Oklahoma is a blue blood institution. They've recruited very well. They have a great amount of talent there, and the coaching staff is a staff that is used to those style of defenses, that's used to that style of gamesmanship coming from Clemson. So I think that right there is something we have to watch. Not only are the coaches going to fit in, but I think Oklahoma is going to see a massive boost in terms of recruiting the closer we get to that move whenever it comes down. We've heard multiple conflicting reports as to when that could be, but regardless of the when, the fact that it's happening is enough to yield results. And I know I said I'd only give you 3 points, but because that second one I consider separate, but I could make a justified argument that it was 1A, I'm going to give you a 4th point. A point that I kind of started this video out talking, and I think it's only right that we close it. Because Oklahoma is in a unique position right now in their recruiting class. They have a quarterback that if you've been watching this channel, you're not surprised at all that not only he's a 5-star, but he just went and balled out at the Elite 11. So much so to the tune of he won Elite 11 MVP. And of course, we're talking about Jackson Arnold, the quarterback out of Denton Guyer High School in Denton, Texas, who is now a 5-star quarterback. This is something I've been saying I thought would happen since December. I watched his film, I've watched him live, and he is a phenomenal football player, so I was only waiting for him to hit 5-star status. I talked before about how if he wasn't a 5-star by the time the Elite 11 came around, if he camped well and continued having the seasons I know he's capable of having, I really didn't see how he couldn't be a 5-star. Fast forward, and he attains 5-star status before the Elite 11 ever comes around. But now that he's won Elite 11 MVP, it's going to be interesting to see how he continues to rise, because newsflash, I think he's going to continue to rise. I think if he has a big senior year, he will continue to move up that board. And the reason is simple, because Denton Guyer plays a real tough schedule. They play a lot of really solid teams, and if they go into the playoffs, that's not an easy run. Texas high school football is a little bit different, but that division in particular is really, really good. And if he continues to ball out there, I mean, that's going to be sending a lot of powerful signals, and I have no reason to believe he won't. But what does this mean for the class as a whole? Because we can talk about Jackson Arnold and the personal accolades, but what does that mean to Oklahoma's recruiting class? How does that permeate to the rest of the class? And the answer might be surprising in its simplicity. The fact that he's a 5-star signal caller. I talk about this at length. That's a position that will excite the rest of your recruiting class, whether or not they're wide receivers, tight ends, or defensive linemen, because that 5-star signal caller gives your class direction. It gives your class legitimacy. There's only so many of them in the nation. There are only so many 5-stars. But to get a 5-star quarterback, one that's making the moves Jackson Arnold's making, I think that's overwhelmingly positive, and I don't see how it couldn't permeate into this recruiting class. Look, think of it like this. Another quarterback I said to watch out for because once they made their college decision, it would be an avalanche was Arch Manning. Fast forward to when he committed to Texas, and it was just that. It was an avalanche. But if you don't think that that similar logic couldn't be applied to Jackson Arnold as he continues to show out at these camps, you might have another thing coming, because I think that this is the type of performance that will excite wide receivers, offensive linemen, and even defensive linemen and linebackers. Even though they won't be on the field at the same time as Jackson Arnold, it's the legitimacy he gives this class that I find incredibly intriguing, and I don't think he's done moving up yet. So whenever I look at this, even though I kind of gave 4 reasons, I think that the relationships and the coaches could kind of play off of each other enough to where that's a 1A point, but I'm very interested in hearing not only your feedback on the 4 points, or 3.5 I gave, but also some points you felt like I may have missed. What are some areas you think really prove and highlight why Oklahoma could have a major month of recruiting in July? Can't wait to hear from you as we're set to watch top prospects from the offensive line, defensive line, wide receiver, you name it, make their collegiate decisions, and OU could fly up the board. We're going to be talking more about this on tomorrow's live stream, 5:30 Central Standard Time. Can't wait to see you there. Would love if you came, but I'm going to be having some guests on, as always, to really break down some recruiting right now, some Oklahoma guests. That way we can get a really specialized view of the Oklahoma Sooners, and I know you're going to enjoy it. That's it. See ya.